HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. Since 2009, Heritage Radio Network podcasts have been exploring the wide world of food, beverage, and agriculture. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
This episode is brought to you by Roberta's, home of Heritage Radio Network since 2009. Learn more about Roberta's at robertaspizza.com.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guest is Byron Bates. We'll talk to Byron about Wild World, natural ferments, and more. We'll taste a blind wine Byron brought in for our weekly wine sip. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Texas-born Byron Bates has been part of the New York wine scene for almost 30 years. He's truly one of the champions of natural wines. After bringing in and introducing his restaurant customers to smaller family artisanal producers, he went on to start his own New York-based wine importation company, Goat Boy Selections. To help further promote these and other producers, mostly other producers, Byron founded the Wild World Wine Festival in 2019 with events in New York and Texas. This year, Wild World is in Red Hook, Brooklyn on October 30th, featuring dinners, seminars, panels, a walk-around tasting, celebrating natural wines and other fermented beverages. Byron, you're on the stage now. Welcome back to the Grape Nation.
Thank you, Sam. Very good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, Byron, we had you on 4 years ago, and the reason we had you on 4 years ago is our friend Jay Strell reached out and said, I have a friend Byron who's really doing terrific stuff. He's doing this festival. Would you consider talking to him? And after looking at everything, I'm like, Jesus, this plays into exactly, what's cool, what's important to me. And I just want to point out, and I swear to you, this is not rubbing it in your face. Mm-hmm. But to that point, the Grape Nation has been an early supporter of Wild World. You know, because when it happened, it's like, let's do it. We've been a supporter of other festivals like Character, Raw Wine, the Fancy Lalas, and we've also been very supportive of the smaller, natural, family, artisanal, and thoughtful natural wine producers. So it's great to have you back. So let's get started. As I mentioned in the intro to you, you've been at this a long time. We both hate to admit how long we've been doing stuff, but that's the reality.
For sure.
A lot of times I ask my guests to talk about their history and that chronology to where they got. We kind of discussed that last time. What I'm curious about is where and when that time you got interested in natural wines, and I'm going to use the term natural wine for lack of anything else. I mentioned earlier smaller producers, family, artisanal, but when you got into natural wine, give me a little background on where, and when you got interested in these wines, and somebody had to sort of nudge you towards them. So who was that?
Nobody nudged me towards it. I was in mid-'90s, early '90s in the restaurant business, and we would often have wine training. And I remember I liked wine. I was interested in it, but at 22 or so, you don't really know much. You think it's this huge subject that's extremely hard to grasp for some reason. And I remember we were tasting Opus One. The sales rep was our manager, and everyone was oohing and ahhing. And I thought it was not good. I thought it was closed and oaky. And later, I didn't know why I thought that, and everyone liked it. But I didn't just assume, oh, me stupid. I kind of felt I was onto something. And by chance, I went to Paris that summer for the first time as an adult. And
wine related or just other?
No, not at that age.
Yeah.
I was always interested in places, and I had the Patricia Wells book, and I don't know if you remember that. It was seminal. She had a chapter on wine bars, and we'd highlight them and check them off and go to all the places. And I don't know what I was expecting, but what I got was working class bars where people would come after work and slam like a chilled Beaujolais. And I was coming from this culture where wine was something that was, I guess you could say, snooty, and you had to have a score. It had to be a Grand Cru or a Premier Cru to even be worth your time. There's a famous sommelier who I won't mention, who a sales rep told me he went in to show him or her a bottle of wine, and he just looked at him and folded his arms and says, "I don't do Van de Pays." That would be absurd now for even this person to say that. So there was just this culture where wine was something different back then. You had to get your wine through mailing lists, like the Rocchioli phenomenon, the J. McInerney wines that he championed.
Is this as a consumer or a restaurant?
As a consumer,
right.
I mean, this is the information you're being fed, and it's what you talked about in restaurants. Like, did you see The Spectator? You're 25 and you're like, Spectator, what's that? The top 100 came out and
right.
So-and-so won. Like, oh, those must be great. But having drinking wine as working people drink wine and as the French drank wine, I think for me and a lot of people really opened our eyes to like, wow, you can drink wine like it's Michelob Ultra and just goes down that easy.
You're not chilling Opus.
You're not chilling Opus. Right? That would be disgusting. Yeah. Maybe better.
Yeah.
So that's let's call it natch, because I hate the word natty, and natch is even worse. So the irony works for what I want to say.
We both accept that as a working platform.
Well, natural wine, before I move on, many people like to jump on the semantics of, well, it's not natural. The word natural wine comes from the French word nature, and the Americans changed it because of our fetishizing things that are natural and making us feel better about ourselves. But it really means nature. And in France, nature means raw or naked. Like you get a yogurt that's nature. And that's where the word started, that it has no definition or legal term, is irrelevant and a boring semantic argument. We know what we mean by natural wine. It's nature, it's naked, it can have sulfur, but not much, nothing added, nothing taken away, all that stuff, yes.
You liked wine, you had the Opus, you went to France, you
yes.
saw the working class.
Yes.
Now we're almost at the point where you came back, and I guess you're starting a life pointing towards an interest in natural wines, right?
Not natural wines yet. They weren't here yet. Well, there was early natural wine, which we call pre-natch, which was the Kermit wines. There were some Sans Souf Lapierre that came in. I think Phil Sorrell found all these for Kermit in 94. So those were really the first natural wines to come over. But they weren't all Sans Souf. And aesthetically, they weren't challenging, even the Sans Souf Lapierre. but they were natural. I think when we talk about the start of natural wine, we're talking about maybe Courtois and Dardin Rebo and some earlier things that kind of went
any of the
beyond.
Beaujolais guys, or not?
No, Beaujolais wines never did that. Do you remember the first? I don't want to use the word funky, but the first Courtois or where it's like, oh, what is that flavor?
Yeah, different than Beaujolais.
Different than natural Beaujolais.
Yeah.
And for me, that was Courtois or Dardin Rebo. I know it, an early Dardin Rebo, maybe 97 Crozes Hermitage. I mean, me and many of the early natural wine people remember standing around drinking that, and that was kind of a changing thing. But we got more and more into them. The word natural wasn't around yet, at least not here. I didn't hear that word until 2000. I was doing a wine list for a place on First Avenue, and a company called Vineyard Expression came by, and Mark Whitmore, and his sales rep Donald Breckenridge, who still is in the natural wine trade, also a novelist, brought by some Courtois and other natural things I don't remember. They were really wild, and they made sense with some of the food we've had, and that it was the East Village. It was more engaging and conversational, and exuberant and pure. But it was a challenge.
Was the challenge getting the consumer, the restaurant person, to drink them, like to recommend, and they go, "I never heard that," or "That doesn't sound great"?
Absolutely.
I mean,
but before that, the challenge was personal. I knew, I was like, what is this? Like, is this wine?
This is you.
Yeah.
Reckoning with everything.
Early, the really wild ones. The Courtois, right. I mean, the door, the one with the teardrop on it, the white, was kind of oxidative and not something I'd ever had. But I kept going back to it.
But was there another handful of wines considered to be natural that weren't as funky, or that was really?
Well, we didn't know yet. It was Cru Beaujolais, like Lapierre and Foillard, the Gang
Which
of
was
Four.
Not funky.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly. So when it all kind of came together, when Vineyard Expression, and then soon after that, Jenny and Francois imports. And then soon after that, Dresdner, who was before, but really became...
What are we talking? Late 90s, or are we into the 2000s already?
Vineyard Expression was late 90s.
Okay.
2000s was, I think, 2001 was the first time I saw Jenny.
It's crazy how not that long ago all of this is.
No, it wasn't that long ago. Yeah. And it was very fun, and it was a diverse group that was kind of saying anti-establishment. We kind of hated that Somme culture that kind of didn't like us either, and didn't accept us. It was snooty and male driven and machismo and just male splaining everything. And you had to like this and opening just ridiculous wines that were just over oaked and too serious. There was no fun in it. God bless them. Many of them were natural wine advocates now, and some of them have started companies selling natural wine. It's just too interesting to ignore.
Right.
But it was a struggle early on. I don't want to, I didn't do anything, nothing heroic, but
you carried to the next restaurant, or as years went by, a conviction.
Absolutely.
And a dedication towards, these wines producers and getting them out there.
All of the early people did. I think we knew we were right. It's just that thing that clicked, and we're just like, this is what everyone should be drinking. And if they don't, it's all I want to sell. I can't go back to the other ones.
So can I pull something out of the air? You were at Balthazar many years ago, big boisterous restaurant, interesting place, interesting owner.
Mm-hmm.
You're there championing, I can't say it, the wines. Are people receptive? I mean, I kind of asked you that before. I mean, did McNally let you bring these wines in?
No, not then.
No. So the Balthazar days were not really
Well, everyone was there.
Right. That's its significance. That's sort of the seed of where everyone came from.
So there must have been some magic there and some reason that happened.
So then everyone kind of flanges off, and starts really driving the mission.
Yeah, I don't remember. I remember us talking about Beaujolais a lot, but and when the Darden Rebo was opened, I remember those moments. But Jonathan Nossiter, who's a semi-champion of natural wine now, his list was very interesting. It was all French, that's what was radical then. That it was an all French list that was heavy on Alsace, but it was
that's even more radical.
That was very radical.
But where's the radicalism that there was no American and Italian or mostly Napa crap and all that stuff?
That's right. It was
that's what people were looking. Those Parker big Napa cabs.
That's
people
right.
Were,
I had an owner throw a list at me and said, "Where's the Farniente? There's got to be Farniente," which would be an absurd thing to say today.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, so it was radical to have an all French list then.
So that was Nossiter.
That was Nossiter.
Balls to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Got your attention. Had some influence on you.
Sure, it was Natural Light, Rosenthal. A lot of Skarnik. I think there was a little bit of Kermit, a lot of Beaujolais. So there's an aesthetic to Beaujolais or to the glue culture that's such a big part of natural wine that was there. So there were elements, but it wasn't formed yet. I think when Arnaud Ehrhardt, he opened 360 in the early.
Was that out in Brooklyn?
It was in Red Hook.
Red Hook, exactly. Right, which is a funky neighborhood then.
Yeah. Which was really interesting, and everyone, he had a great list that went really deep and was all natural, which to me, that or Bow 111 in the East Village by the two Chris's, Chris Andrews and Chris Johnson, was an early all natural list in the city. And everyone was considered pretty nuts for doing it. I think Arnaud got away with more because it was Red Hook, and you're expected to be a little funky out there, and you can take risks, and you don't have the Manhattanites or the expectations.
But you kind of sifted that noise out.
I'm sure you got a few people. Where's the Farniente? Exactly.
Yeah, but that makes sense. So, is that restaurant and that list sort of the beginning of the commitment,
Well, I remember Jorge Riera, who were very good friends. We were very close back then. I had a little restaurant, kind of a punk rock cafe that served food, kind of old school.
And wine?
It was we had all 10 Beaujolais crews.
Okay.
I remember he had just come back from Le Débouté in 2000. I think this must have been 2002, and he could, his voice fluttered. He was so excited to show me these wines, and I was like, "Oh, these wines are effed up." But his enthusiasm, intrigued me, and it just took off from there. And we had parties with Terry Pouzelat at the restaurant, Olivier Cousin. This was just it's like piano. It was basically, we opened the same week as pianos. In
were the parties for you, or you were able to get people to come and drink? I mean, little of both.
Little of both.
Okay.
Yeah. There just wasn't that big of a culture for this then, but we had a lot of passion for it. Then Laurent Saillard came along, and
another notable.
He was a big champion of the wines, and now makes the wines. But yeah, I remember
Jorge has served me his wines. They're terrific.
Yeah, Jorge just had such passion for these wines, and was such spoke about them with such enthusiasm. It was infectious, and you just wanted to try them. That's what happened to me. And Bill Fitch, who's also works with me importing wines.
So you're open. And you're already taking it in, but you meet guys like Jorge, who even you're looking at saying, "Oh my God, this guy's off the charts about this stuff."
Sure,
so that's infectious to you too.
He took it to the next level. I was already on board with Glou and Beaujolais, and light whites, light reds, not oaked. And he took me to that next step, and I became very enthusiastic about the wines. We, Puzelat, Moss, a lot of the early ones.
So I may be leaving a gap in between, but at some point you're doing this, there's recognition of natural wines more than before. You worked at a handful of restaurants. When and why do you get out of that and start an import company? Is it you want to get off the floor, or it's you
yes.
could be more effective importing than somming?
I got a job as a GM at ISA in Brooklyn, and I did the wine list. I wanted to do, there wasn't much of a budget, so I wanted to do something I hadn't done with natural wine yet. So how do you make a statement with a small list? I decided to do something, which is a little eye-rolling now, but it made sense to me then, which was all sans souffle list.
Wow.
And the younglings on the floor and in the kitchen accused me of being, a 40-year-old man that was copying what the kids are doing. Like, oh, natural wine must be cool, so I'm going to do that too. And there was
that must have hurt a little.
It was absurd.
It was absurd. Is the right word, actually.
And it's funny now. I was 39 or 40. Just the ageism on the floor I saw, and I wasn't comfortable working the floor in a restaurant anymore. Nothing bad happened. It was just like, it's time to move on.
A culmination, and that towards the end. So
exactly.
That happens, and you go, well, what am I going to do? And the logical thing was stay in the business, represent what you believe in.
Well, there was a feeling then that there were too many importers, which is funny now because there's triple the amount of natural wine importers that there was in 2013 when we started.
Too many natural-leaning importers?
Sure, yeah. There's a story where Joe Dresner pulled Zev Rovine aside, which...
Does Joe look at Zev as like a small startup?
Oh, I think the story Zev told me once is Joe told him, is like, there's no more wines. You should get out of this business early on. Which is kind of tongue in cheek. Joe had that way about him.
That's,
But that was the feeling. And in 2013, people would say, well, there was also the feeling that might be true. In 2013, people were, what are you going to get? There's no more wines out there. But of course there is.
I was going to ask you this question later, and it's, you don't have to give me a long answer. Are there still wineries that have no representation that need guys like you? I mean, whether you like the wine or not is your call, but you could travel through France and Italy and Eastern Europe, and you could still pick up, or everyone's got their hands on someone?
No, you can always find things.
And is there decent stuff out there?
That's harder to find. I mean, we've got a really good team. We have a partner in France that is as they say, an OG natural wine from the 80s in Paris, who connects us to a lot of people that wouldn't normally export to America or haven't been looked at. But the problem with too many importers now is it seems like such a fun business that people are bringing in wines we would be approached with years ago and just kind of like, oh, these guys again, like they're never going to get imported. The wine sucks.
Right.
And you're seeing those come in now because there's an upstart of some importers, some are great, that are starting to bring these in.
Because they need to bring something.
They need to bring something in.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I've been to festivals, not sure Wild World, where you talk to people pouring and they have no representation, which is part of the reason they're here.
It seems crazy. And early on,
I mean, I don't, maybe in the last couple of years that's slowed down a little, but that's been the case. It's like, who represents you? Goes, nobody. Anybody?
It's difficult. But maybe the wines aren't, certain big books may have too many producers that are similar and they don't want to,
Where they suck.
Or they suck.
Yeah. All right. So you answered my question on, how natural wine touched you, how you stayed with it, how you ran with it, and how you got to, importing it. So for me, this is a good segue to my next question, which you and I kind of collaborated a little about some of the things we want to talk to. And this is such a big one because, without really asking you, you did define natural wine in your mind. I've lost the audacity to say, Byron, you're an expert. Give me your definition of natural wine. You came out unsolicited. But here's a segue that's interesting to me. The history of natural wine in the U.S., which you talked about a little because kind of you were part of it. But I'm interested in the history as it applies in the U.S. Would you say some of the things we discussed, are important to, the exposure and growth of natural wine? You New York guys, Jorge, Arnard, all those guys.
Yeah.
But take the history thing to a bigger place too.
Do I think we've helped expand natural wine globally?
Or you were part of the early history in the U.S.?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So what is the history of the U.S.? Is it fair to say what you discussed is part of it or a start?
Sure. Well, there's, I'm sure I'm leaving some people out. Of course I am. And
don't
apologies
worry
to any
about
of them.
That. I mean, you're not going to get everyone.
Well, it's just become, there was Lou Amdur, who's in Los Angeles, who I know was very early champion of these wines. It was difficult to sell the wines early on. They would re-ferment. The owners of the places you were doing the list for would, I remember protests like, what's wrong with you? Why is this on the menu? And I stood by it and I remember having Telkel by, it's a Gamay, called Le Telkel. I think it's Pouzelat. Anyway, a Loire cuvée in 2005, and it's everywhere now. But we poured it by the glass then, and I remember I was like in a corner of the restaurant, like, what have I done? People were like, I can't believe you're selling this.
In a bad way.
In a bad way, yeah.
Did you say it re-fermented, or some of the wines re-fermented?
A lot of them did back then. There wasn't what we call mouse now, for some reason.
So re-fermentation
in the bottle, yeah.
Whatever the mousy thing or how wide of it would get that.
Yeah, the corks would be pushed down. There wasn't the shipping standards now.
What about appearance? Did it get cloudier, or that wasn't?
There was a little bit of that, but not as much as now. Now that's a plus, I think.
Right.
Then it was. They were a little cleaner. There were certainly cloudy wines, but I think definitely more now.
All right, so stay with the history.
Mm-hmm.
In the U.S., keep what are some of the other things, that were happening that kind of built the foundation, for natural wine.
Well, I mean, not until the teens did it really kind of start to go mainstream. I mean, you had a handful of people, which we've discussed, in the aughts.
Are you talking like 13 or 18?
Like 2010 to 2020 era.
Okay, so that decade was
that's when it changed and went expanded.
And what were the things that made it expand? Importers, guys like you that were succeeding in getting it on lists, evangelizing these wines?
Well, I don't know if it was anyone's goal to promote or evangelize them. I think I remember going to like a corporate wine event in the early, like maybe 2011, 2010. And, there's Sonoma-Cutrer. It was a big event, but there were two natural people, I think from the Rhone. And all these people were regular people you'd see at like Aspen Food and Wine, like corporate food and wine lifers. And there was the line for the natural wine producers were exponentially longer. There was a long wait. So whether they wanted to admit it or not and roll their eyes at what was happening, they were curious about it. And it couldn't be ignored any longer. The wines are delicious. they can go to places that conventional wines, commercial wines can't. They're more prone to be flawed uh, because there's no additives or fewer additives and fewer chemicals. But you're going to get.
So you're talking about this wine event in 2011, you said?
Yeah, and
It's
I mean,
now
when
2023.
Maybe it was earlier.
Are people more educated, even if those flaws exist, or there's more consistency, or both?
Well, there's more consistency. Well, there was more consistency. Now there's so many people are bringing in some of the stuff that's not really good.
Right.
There's an influx of importers now that are bringing in things that aren't good. There's also mainstream commercial books that are bringing in stuff that's not really interesting.
That's where this stuff goes, though, with any category.
With any category, yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just kind of sad how it gets proliferated by people just wanting to be in that crowd.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think this curiosity came about. I think young people really picked up on it. It's a culture that's inclusive. It's interesting. It's really easy to understand right off, and you're understanding something that you thought you never could, like wine. Oh, I understand wine. I thought I would never understand this, but I get this, and it's not what I thought it was. It's not this serious Parker 99 Wine Spectator mystery. It's not my parents' wine,
right?
And I think kids really expanded this. And the culture of inclusion, the culture of it's a lot like music, it's what your friends are listening to. In this case, it's what your friends are drinking.
It's a good point.
Yeah, that's where, what are you drinking? It's you don't really learn it.
Or you go to a party and you bring 2 bottles and you turn people on.
That's right.
Not even the question, it's the serve.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean that's a big part. Do you think the proliferation of natural wines in the U.S. was on a similar parallel to Europe, or because everything you said, this demographic and how the wines came in, is the history in the U.S. totally different then?
The thought process in Paris is different, but the trajectory is exact. There's such huge connections between the scene in Paris and New York. From Four Horsemen to Le Verroulet to everyone knows everyone very well, and a lot of us are doing the same thing, or are inspired by each other to do similar things.
Is there is there a demographic sweet spot, like for everything that's going on? The majority of the interest is drinking age to 40, less interest over 40. Is it wider? 10 years ago, that 30-year-old is now grown to a 40-year-old. I mean, or is it pretty inclusive?
Is it like
now?
hippies where when they turn 40 they
same thing with music too again.
Yeah, with music. Yeah. No, there's a lot of middle age and older people that started in their 20s and 30s in this that are very much into this. But yeah, the sweet spot is young people.
Is it fair to say that once people know, that generation is big on, background and stories, once they know the story, about these wines, where they came from and how they're farmed, is that as important to them too, other than just the label?
I think the story.
Because we talked about orange wine. Just because it's orange wine, it's cool. What is it? I don't know.
Right.
Natural wines, but there's more, and that's the story and the people. Is that what drives people towards the interest along with the product?
Very much so.
Okay.
I think to a fault sometimes. I think sometimes we know too much about our producers. You don't know who makes your vacuum cleaner, so you can't judge them. Sometimes you see a flaw, and
I'd like to meet my vacuum cleaner guy. I'd like to punch him in the head. The battery lasts like 34 minutes. You think it would be longer, right?
These days, you think it would.
Yeah. All right, so before we got to take a break in a couple of minutes, and of course, I want to move to Wild World, and you and I could sit here and probably do a season of shows on this topic.
Well, I was there. I'm not the expert, and I don't think there is an expert on this. But
I think you're underselling yourself a little. I think at least by osmosis, you were there. It gives you some information that wasn't accessible to other people. Let me calm you down. You're a mini expert. Okay. Is that fair enough?
I'll take that.
So one of the other things, as you and I were corresponding, is one of the things you said, and make sure I'm on the right track with this, if it applies to what we've been talking about. You mentioned in a very short line, let's talk about the fact that the wine industry is in trouble. Do you remember saying that?
I don't know if, well, I maybe said something as grandiose as that, but I doubt it.
But what were you thinking when you wrote that? Because all the other things you said were
okay.
all...
Well, I think, the natural wine world itself is in a little bit of trouble because, many factors. One is climate change.
I want you to address that, but lead me into that, the other trouble things.
There's many people importing things that aren't good right now.
Right.
There's markets have disappeared. Like the rosé market is suddenly gone, and people are closing out wines right now and flooding the market with closeouts. And we're not purchasing.
Clarify that a little. You have all these importers. They have inventory. They don't want to be stuck with it, so they're going in the market and flooding the market.
Exactly.
Which kind of pushes you aside because, hey, Byron, thanks, but I can get this stuff.
It pushes, and if it's pushing me or us aside, it's pushing the winemaker aside too.
Right.
Like we can't buy right now
the reality.
Because that's the reality.
Yeah.
Like any business.
Right.
But I just wish people knew that. I wish sommeliers or wine directors would, I understand pricing. I've done this my whole adult life, but when a wine is $24 and a Budweiser or cocktail is still $14, like you're sending the wrong message. You're hiding all of your costs in wine. And these wines, people have experience with them where they're not to their taste. They're flawed, and they're told they're not flawed by an inexperienced sommelier. They're not exciting because they're selling an $8 bottle for $24. So I think people are shy to order wine on a wine list. And I don't want to, say anything bad about my friends that are sommeliers because some of them work in very expensive restaurants and it's justified. But I'm talking about where a cocktail is $14. You need a wine that costs that price too.
Right.
Otherwise, people aren't going to buy it.
Yeah, I mean, logically, you need to compete. You need to make it compelling. You need to make it a consideration.
Exactly.
You blow it right out of the water, with an $8-10 differential.
And when it's a risk.
Right.
Conventional wine knows, that Opus One at $30, they know what they're getting.
It's not Mayomi Pinot Noir.
No, it's not. Exactly.
Right. Anything else before I want you to talk about climate change? So they're flooding the market. What else? What are some of the other troubles that
a lot of misinformation?
In what form?
A lack of curiosity and excitement from some sommeliers or programs. I think people need to do more research and work, digging up wines maybe people have never had that they're excited by, instead of digging up $8 bottles that are on closeout that no one is excited by anymore.
Has there been a shift in the somm world that prompts you to say that, or that vibe has been going on? Because a lot of people you and I know, you work with, people that are friends, left the floor, and they're doing similar things, importation or, whatever. Is that because those guys were better at it and the new people aren't, or that's always been the mindset, or there was always a sector that had that mindset?
I mean, that was always how this was dismissed. Like the sommeliers. I mean, we get it too. Like I'll send a wine back and well, maybe you don't like natural wine. Have you had it? And then just you just take it and okay, whatever.
Right.
But I think, your average customer comes into a restaurant to order a glass of wine, and maybe the sommelier is young, which doesn't mean anything, but maybe they're inexperienced too.
Right.
Or their enthusiasm is misguided. It's in one spot because they visited this one vineyard and the magic dust was sprinkled on them, and they're enamored
one
by
country.
And even that's fine, but I think it's. I wish we weren't all selling the. I get this a lot from my friends. We see the same wines at a lot of the same places. There's not many people digging deeper. There's not many good record stores with that killer import section. It's like, where did you find this? I've never seen this. It's like, oh my God, you've got
have to
Ganavet.
dig more.
Yeah, now
wine,
it's, now it's, oh my God, you've got Ganavet. This is gonna kill, which is great, but I'm more personally, I want you to show me something I've never seen.
Right.
I
That's
just kind of do.
Kind of safe in that, genre. But is access to these wines? I know, I talked to Justin Cherno or whatever. He goes, you see that? I get 3 bottles now. I used to get cases or whatever. Is access
access
to
is
you
a problem.
And then
to
the restaurant?
And that's why you need to dig for other stuff. Yes.
Right. But that's even, Justin will admit, so I couldn't get that. I found this.
Yeah.
That's inquisitive. Other people are like, I couldn't get that. I'm screwed. So access, because so many people are interested and the allotments just continue to shrink.
Yeah, exactly. That was early on when I did a list that was mostly natural. I would get, Manhattanites come in and go, I don't know any of these wines. Like, you're not supposed to. Like
it's like, okay, you feel like you validated the subject? Or
yeah, exactly.
It's
like,
silly.
Again, where's the farniente?
Yeah, it's a good point. Let's close out on, and this is not a subject, that should be rushed, but, you don't have to spend forever on it. And that's the affectations of climate change in the world you and I are talking about, which is, natural producers in that sense. We have a concern about climate change. To people that practice thoughtfully, is it different for them? Is it harder for them? Is it because they're smaller, they don't have money, there's more on the line?
It's all those things. And I don't want to pretend to be an expert on this, but what I've seen and been told, first of all, if you want to talk about climate change as a controversy, you won't get that from natural winemakers. It's just a given. It's a shrug, like 100%. Of course, there's climate change because they're all seeing drastically different picking times.
Right.
They're seeing more hail. They're seeing, which is maybe the worst.
Later bud, earlier pick.
Exactly. Or frost.
Right.
So some producers have, they're doing co-ferments. They're making wines with other people. There's a Loire producer that was buying Merlot from a Roussillon producer and vinifying it in Chinon and selling it. And that's commonplace now. Maybe less natural sometimes than it used to be because they need to make a living and can't afford to lose what they do have. And I think as consumers and dogmatic natural wine buyers, we need to be more patient and understanding of that. It's a commodity. It's a product we enjoy, and if they need to make a living, sometimes a little sulfur is not
right.
Is not the boogeyman. They're just trying to make a living. They're doing the best they can. If they're making a wine with another producer in another region, that might not make sense. If the wines don't reflect terroir, that's fine too. Which, what I mean is, if they are buying grapes from somewhere else, or doing something that wouldn't typically taste like their region, sometimes it's okay. Some of them aren't affected, but there was a rash of suicides
because of all of these.
Because
changes?
Of all this,
wow.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that, but I'm sure that's a factor.
Right. Very stressful.
It's very stressful, and I think they deserve our support and an open mind. And what they're getting a lot of times is over criticized for many things, for political reasons, for practices. I just feel like we need to support them more. And
does it seem like they're subjected to more scrutiny, or not necessarily?
Well, I can't say anyone's been unfairly scrutinized. The ones that have been scrutinized have been fairly scrutinized, right. and they need to be called out. That's fairness and equity is what something we all understand and strive for. It's nothing new. Yeah, I just think, especially in the practices in the winery, I think we need to be more open-minded to some of the, I don't want to call them shortcuts, but some of the techniques and some of the things
You're
they're doing
saying
to survive.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And don't forget, we're talking under the light of climate change, that these are things that you may have to think about doing.
Sure.
You're kind of forced.
Sure.
So when you say shortcut, that's the negative. But the reality is, because of that, maybe you have to pivot. So are these...
Exactly.
Would you say these winemakers, and again, natural, small, family or whatever, they're better and more likely to pivot to do these things?
Well, they have to pivot, yeah.
Well, they don't have to. I'm sure some Napa cab guy is going to, milk the climate change thing, planting.
Well, they're not going to go conventional. They're not going to.
No, I don't mean that way. I mean, start planting other things, co-fermenting. That type.
I've seen
maybe
some of
Malbec
that.
grows better in Napa, and you need to blend that in,
right?
Or
right.
But the smaller, the natural guys are more likely to make the pivot because they have to.
Well, yeah, they're risking more. They're not
right.
using the chemicals to guarantee a product.
Right. So I think we're really at the, I mean, the effects of climate change we've been talking about for years, but I think it just, it gets more difficult. I mean, each season sort of brings another challenge. So,
yeah.
I mean, I'd love to talk about that again. Byron, we got to take a quick break. Like I said, these are some pretty heavy discussions. So
I'm not sure I'm the right one.
No, that's not my point. My point is, if we didn't get to everything, if you didn't, I mean, it's okay. We'll get to it at some point. We're gonna take a quick break. We're talking to Byron Bates. Byron is the founder, creator of the Wild World Festivals, Go Boy Selections, wine importation. When we come back, I want to talk to Byron about the upcoming Wild World Natural Wine and Fermentation Festival coming to New York. You're listening to The Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Roberta's, home of Heritage Radio Network. Roberta's was founded in Bushwick in 2008 and has become one of the most iconic restaurants in the country. HRN made its home inside of Roberta's in 2009, and together they have become part of the DIY fabric of the neighborhood. Roberta's is open for lunch and dinners 7 days a week and serves much more than just the famous wood-fired pizzas. Their team dreams up new salads, pastas, and sandwiches on the regular. Roberta's Tiki Bar is alive and well in the back garden, serving up frozen drinks in the summer and hot toddies in the winter. Stop by the bakery and takeout spot next door for fresh breads, sticky buns, and pizzas to go. But Roberta's also extends beyond Bushwick, with multiple locations in New York City, Long Island, and Los Angeles. You can also find their frozen pies in grocery stores around the country. The spirit of Roberta's, like Heritage Radio Network, is everywhere. Here's to many more years of pizza-powered radio. Learn more about Roberta's at robertaspizza.com.
All right, we're back. We're back with my guest, Byron Bates. I know I mentioned Byron Bates once at the end of the first half. I should promote him more. Maybe I'll do that. All right. So, Wild World Natural Wine and Fermentation Festivals coming to New York at the end of the month. You and I are sitting here in early October. The Wild World, what is the official name of it? I see Wild World. I see Wild World Festival. I see Wild World Wine Festival. And from it, what do we call it from here on in? Wild World.
Wild World Fermentation Festival.
Okay, Wild World Fermentation Festival. So this October 30th, and one of the reasons I actually wanted you on last week, Byron, but you were at your dad's birthday, to give time to talk about this and maybe sell some tickets and, anything else. October 30th at Strong Rope Brewery in Red Hook, Brooklyn. It's kind of a cool spot. It's right near the water or on the water, right? I remember going to past ones and it was indoor mostly. Is this one mostly outdoor or?
No, it's indoors.
It is indoor. Okay. You could grab a bite and walk outside and eat or eat, drink and all of that. All right. So you and I discussed this off air. Talk to me about the festival, the mechanics. Let's talk about, when is it?
Well, the basics is it's October 30th from 12 to 6:30.
Okay.
50 plus producers of all different types of wild fermented products. It's mostly natural wine, but with ciders, meads, and some foods. There's soju, there's some kombucha, and our snack bar is going to be curated and run by Emile Desmond, from a great young chef from Le Chateaubriand in Paris. And
that's pretty hot stuff.
He's creating a stinky cheeseburger, which is ground lamb with époisse, amongst many other things. So if you come for anything, come for that.
Talk about going off the recipe a little. Curiosity. You said you have 50 plus producers. How do you curate and select these guys?
We don't vet them. And they just have to fit certain parameters.
But do you reach out? Do they reach out to you?
Both.
Do you?
Both.
Okay.
We have a website, wildworldfestival.com, where they can sign up. But we only want the wine producers to wild ferment. The reason being...
Can you just quickly tell people, if they're scratching their head, what a wild fermentation is?
It's just an open fermentation with indigenous wild yeasts that are present there.
Right. No addition.
It's not inoculated with a chemical or a factory-produced yeast, which most wines are. The beers don't have to be wild fermented. They have to be craft, which there's not a technical term for that, but we all know what it means. The meads and ciders have to be wild fermented. When I say we don't vet, I just mean we want to be open to produce. I don't want to thumbs up or thumbs down the quality of something, because the idea is to improve and to share information. So some of these people maybe could improve if they're around other producers and colleagues. They can share information. We're a science-based festival that's structured around the producers and their dialogue and their needs. But it happens to be open to the public, and we sell tickets so you can come and find out.
So you're serving the producer in your mind by saying not vetting. If that guy can come, meet people, learn, it's a great...
If they're going for this style of wild fermented natural wines, yes, they can come.
Right.
I don't think I should say, the wines suck, get out of here, because they want to come because they want to improve them. Having said that, nothing really sucks. They're on the right track, and
trust me, I'm sure. Stay with the mechanics with me for a second. We're talking about Strong Rope Brewery, a walk-around tasting, with 50 wine, mead, cider, and all that. In addition, that's part of this festival. Talk to me about panel discussion seminars. You're doing a dinner, which further extends the reach, of all of this.
Right. Well, we call ourselves a science-based festival, which means... we want to dispel myths. We're an open-minded inquiry forum, and we felt there was a really gap there. that it was mostly a celebration at other festivals and a place to sell wine, not to be challenging or controversial. So the panel discussions,
did it evolve to that, or you always had that notion?
Yeah, it started with that.
It did. Okay.
What has evolved this year, and what makes this one more exciting to me, is we're doing the panels the night before, and it's just for the producers.
Not open to the public.
There's a few tickets to the public, which are being released now. There's 100 seats total. I think the producers look at like 70 of them.
I'm going to ask you again, but where would somebody go website-wise? Because maybe they'll jump on the computer now.
wildworldfestival.com.
Okay.
It's $150 for the dinner. It's based on the King Midas Feast, which if you've read Dr. Patrick McGovern's book, Ancient Fermentation, him and Sam from Dogfish Head. He's an anthropologist. He's considered the Indiana Jones of fermented beverages, and he's our guest speaker, along with panels with Alice Byring, Garrett Oliver, and many others. We'll do a panel on co-ferments, a panel on ancient fermentation, and then the dinner is going to be prepared by Gabby Guillemetti, used to work up in Hudson at a very famous place called Monfilio Bakery, which many will know, and he'll be doing the dinner there. And it goes from 6 to 10, all the wines included. You'll be privy to ask questions for the panels. Yeah.
It sounds like a very thoughtful, well thought out event. And I also like the way you differentiate. Listen, there's a lot of festivals around the world, in New York, how you differentiate, what this is versus others. And they all have their own, shtick or whatever. Not shtick. But
it's a shtick, sure.
They all have their own goals or
this
whatever.
is my shtick.
Now, you said myths that you were trying to dispel by way of the festival.
Correct.
Give me the Casey Kasem top 5, myths that we need to dispel.
The insistence that natural wine doesn't give you a headache is one. That's
BS.
That's anecdotal.
Okay,
that's not real science.
Because people say, "Oh, there's no sulfur in it."
You get headaches from having too much. Well, some people get headaches from having too much ethanol, which is really the culprit here.
That's
low amounts of sulfites or I just want the science on that, and we want to hear the science. I'm not a teacher, and I build this festival around people teaching me or teaching us and answering the questions we might have. I don't need to hear someone say, it doesn't give you a headache, drink up. It's better for the environment, drink up. Tell me why. And tell me why the flavor is like this. Let's talk about the aesthetics and the politics, the ethics of these products. That it's just good for the environment because it's less bad than conventional wine. It's not good for the environment. It's just, like I said, less bad than conventional wine.
Wait, so we're picking words, but it's important. People think this is good for the environment. There's nothing good or bad good. It's just not as bad as the other practitioners.
It's less bad.
Less bad. That was your term. That's fair and that's honest.
It's honest, and I just think there needs to be a forum that checks that sort of BS and that anecdotal evidence, and that it's really pointless. And it was, people were running rampant with it. We were seeing panels and people discussing as if it were fact some of these ideas, and it seemed to be taking over the discussions about natural wine and fermentation. It's this, and no one.
Was one of those myths, it's cloudy, it's mousy, it's inconsistent, or that's just part of the.
Well, some are. I think there's a myth in the general public
that presentation is seen as not a right wine.
Exactly.
Right.
And it may not be
this
right.
is the way it is. You're thinking otherwise.
Well, it may not be to your taste, but one of the arguments I wanted there's this tech som thing. The first one in Austin we did. It's like I wanted them to come, and these people that are in the press announcing they don't like natural wine. I said, I can do a festival where it's impossible for them to say they don't like these wines. They're beautiful, or whatever beauty is. They're not flawed in the way they think they are. Natural wine is not a flavor profile. It tastes like natural wine.
People think that. Yeah.
They think it is. It can be. There's a bigger spectrum of flavors, and a lot of them cradle what we consider flawed or.
But why is that? I mean, is that an education thing? I mean, that's a crazy point to me. You could dispel that, which is what we're talking about. But why do people still think that? I mean, it's just because this is in its infancy and, things need to be worked out or understood, or
maybe some disgust for the culture around it and the explainism that a lot of us are guilty of. But natural wine it's just more varied in texture, and we wanted to show that. It's more varied in aromas and flavors. And the spectrum of flavors is much greater. Conventional wines they're cosmetically enhanced. It's like, I guess, cosmetic surgery. If you have work on your face done, they can all sort of look similar. And the limited features of a wine or a human face that humans can be conscious of liking are similar to each other. So conventional wines can start, or manipulated wines can start looking very similar. And the beauty or the wabi-sabi can be in the one that kind of cradles, that dances with flawed, that gets closer to the sun.
Right.
That's where real beauty comes from. Not a dogmatic about sulfites. Many wines are very bad, but I can say the most.
Because of no sulfites, they're bad?
I can say the best wines I've ever had were without sulfur. But
can you name one or two?
I don't remember.
Okay.
But
French?
But they can just be extraordinary and perfect. But they take real risk doing that.
Still.
It's really lucky to. Oh, sure.
Years and years later.
Sure.
Is the risk like shipping it? Temperature changes, putting it on a boat or a plane, or it goes way before that?
Sure, it can get materized easier.
That's part of it. Also, 3 days after it's
bacterial
fermented.
or re-ferment. Many things can go wrong. Chance is open to more degrees of chaos. And you'll get that with natural wine. It's a risk, but it's not boring. And life shouldn't be boring, should it?
No, true that. And, if you know, you know. If you don't, you need to try.
That's right.
Should I
open this now?
Yeah. Let me ask you about this. We've been talking about wines. Good luck opening that. We had to get 5.
I'm going to blind taste you on this, but
okay. We talked about, a little about farming, certainly what you do in the cellar, what the philosophy is. What we haven't talked about is the people and the culture. Now, part of the culture we talked about is how people perceive, natural wines and all that. Mm-hmm. But there's also a culture of the winemakers and the community. And that's as much about like people, ethics, mm-hmm. people working and all of that. I mean, is that more present in natural winemakers? I would think so, right?
It's
part of the overall culture.
It's a big part of the overall culture. I think sometimes we go too far and ask too much of the producers, and expect put them on a pedestal a lot of times.
Now we do.
And that can be dangerous.
First, they put chefs on a pedestal.
Yeah.
They were rock stars. Then a lot of somms sort of made their way. Social media helped all of that.
You know what happens?
Restaurants were the original.
You know what happens when you're on a pedestal?
Fall off.
Yeah, you can fall off.
Yeah. I agree with all of that. Then winemakers. These guys, they were put on pedestals, and everybody kind of bowed to them.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So there's definitely a different and better culture. All right, so you're pouring a wine. In a few minutes, we're going to get more in depth, about the wines. But you want me to see if I could figure out what this is?
It's not that hard.
It smells like a cider. But what do I know? I have to spit today. Wow, is that good?
You like that?
I'm thinking pear.
Pear cider?
Pear co-ferment.
Wow. You don't have to spit because it's kombucha. NA.
So I could say it at Raw Wine. I did the guys from New York. I did kombucha. And I didn't commit the taste enough to memory. And I remember walking away.
Of course.
That
10 years ago,
this is people think of kombucha. You buy in a bodega. There's 4 of them across.
Exactly.
This is like artisanally made to the next level.
See the bottle? Wait,
is there no alcohol in here?
No alcohol. It's presented as a wine. I had this at Fulgurant's, and they blind tasted it with one of the courses, and we all thought Pet Nat.
Yeah, I would say Pet Nat.
Yeah.
I would say Pet Nat, or I said cider first, because there's a teeny bit of fruitiness to it that I find here more than in a Pet Nat.
It's a little, it's not as deceptive as another cuvee I had of this, but it's from Unified Ferments, which
those are the guys I spoke to.
Yeah.
Aren't they in town or in Brooklyn?
They're in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
They're
Two
near
guys.
the Navy Yard in Clinton Hill. 2 guys, old friends, and the goal is to approach the complexity and depth of wine while honoring the tea. And this is an oolong from Central Taiwan.
I remember they were using tea.
Wensheng.
That's
Wensheng
what I'm
Baozhou.
getting. I'm getting as a little kid, you drink Chinese tea and you'd have this distinctive sort of like aftertaste. This is it in a good way.
It has the aesthetics of a fermented alcoholic beverage. And that's kind of why I had this represent Wild World, is that was kind of the through line with the beers we were choosing, and the wines and the ciders. There's more in common with these craft products, these fermented products. I think with natural wine, the natural wine has with conventional wine, which is a bigger chasm to me.
Right.
Aesthetically, there's a through line with lambic beers, kombucha made like this, ciders
What's
made like
lambic? The introduction of fruits or other flavorings?
Lambic or coolship, a wild fermented beer like what Cantillon does.
If you could only get it now.
Exactly.
So lambic is the style?
Yes.
Okay. This is the dumbest, most uninformed question I'm going to ask you. Can you make alcoholic kombucha?
Yes.
I mean,
I think it's very low.
Right. So you wouldn't do it to make it close to a Pet Nat. That's not what you're.
No. I think you're talking maybe 2% tops, and I'm guessing. We talked a little bit about this with Young from Unified Ferments, and he did want to point out that it's non-alcoholic.
So this is a great alternative to people that can't really drink alcohol.
I think so.
Or
drink a lot of alcohol and need to drink a little less.
That's what
cider's been doing.
It's complex. It's interesting. It's delicious.
I remember. Do you remember that pomegranate drink, Pom?
Yeah, sure.
I had a friend.
Tasted nothing like pomegranate.
No, but I had a friend that used to drink that when she wanted to try to drink less or whatever, like drink less sober January, and she said Pom gave her that sensation of red wine,
antioxidant, and
there's tannins,
it has
a little bit,
mouthfeel and all. Yeah, it's also
and
about
it
180
her.
calories.
Yeah, exactly.
She didn't realize it. That's funny. So this is the United Ferment. Unified Ferment.
Unified Ferments in Brooklyn.
It's
always wine bottles.
Right.
It's not the kombucha in the shop.
Right.
And they're blowing up. They're doing such good work.
Do you rep these guys? No, you said you didn't. You said you didn't. I'm sorry I brought that up. All right. As a last topic, and we promised not to spend a lot of time. Congratulations on Goat Boy. I guess you've been doing it about a decade, right?
Oh my goodness!
You started it, like you said, in 13. It's 23 this year. At some point, you hit that 10-year mark, right? So,
sort of a 10-year mark. For the first 6, we were
didn't know what you were doing.
That's the last 6. The first 6 we were with a large import company.
So independent after that 6.
We were like a segment of their book. They bought the wines and did all the logistics, but that was always the deal. It was birthed out of presenting to a larger importer. They need natural wine, and we're the people that can do it.
Interesting.
And now they're doing well with natural wines.
All right, I'm curious who it is, but I'm not going to ask you. Who cares? So it's funny what you just said. You went in one way and you've come out another way. I was going to ask you what your intentions are. I guess intentions or plans change. When you started it, we talked about how you segued from restaurant to importer. Was the intention obvious? I just want to drink these wines that I believe in and bring these guys in and champion them?
This has been vaguely, yes, but more recently, starting with COVID and then the Trump tax on wines, which was devastating. And then this last summer, which was equally devastating in its own way.
The death of rosé.
When we had invested heavily in rosé. But we want to, and I say we, me and my partner Bill Fitch, we want to do something. It sounds so simple-minded and corny, but let's just focus on wines we really like and buy those. Let's not try to we need a Prosecco because we got to make money. We need this because we got to make money. I think there's so much noise out there that if people can just look at the back label, if they have a wine shop they like, then they know who to turn them on to new wines. If they go to a wine shop when they don't know who's in there, they can turn the ball around and see, Zev Rovine selections or LDM, which is Fresner, Jenny and Francois, maybe Goat Boy. And each of the importers kind of have their own aesthetic tastes, their own style. And we want to develop that style. We want to be, I've always seen us as like a sommelier's friend. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of really curious sommeliers out there. But if I were a sommelier, I'm like, nobody has that. You have very little of it. I want it all. Boom. The import section.
Not enough of that. And you said something that I preach, and my guests do exactly what you do. If you know wine, you kind of know what to do, where to go. If you don't know, there are 2 things you could do, and that's be inquisitive to the right people at the right place. If you know there's a cool local wine store, I mean, they're there to curate good stuff and turn you on. So you ask them. You say, hey, I like a light red wine or blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
So talking to people is one thing, and you could apply that to sommeliers too, but we've talked about the flaws of sommeliers. And really the other thing is you guys go through so much pain, business-wise and philosophically, to bring in all these great winemakers. You turn the back of a wine bottle and you're going to find a certain type of wine from Goat Boy, from Kermit Lynch, from Jenny and Francois. We just solved everyone's problem in a way.
Sure.
But you have to look and you have to ask, which is important. And I think, it's kind of as simple as that, So, I was going to ask you, and you answered it. I mean, the importance of a wine importer, is sort of underrated because these are the guys that are giving you the options.
We're the conduit between the producer and the wholesaler.
Right.
And the sommelier is the conduit between the customer and the producer.
And like you said, you have a philosophy. You pick the wines you like. You're not bringing a Prosecco in because you need it in the lineup.
The books that fail have no philosophy.
People who go to your, portfolio, if they love it, they stick with it. If they don't, there's other options.
Sure.
Not the end of the world. So.
And you're not going to like everything. Would be boring.
I agree with that.
But you're going to be challenged or intrigued or...
So many, many more years to go, boy. And hopefully
thank you.
Life gets easier. And listen, I don't have to tell you what to do in life, but I'm going to tell you, order less rosé next year.
That sounds like sound advice.
Please listen to me. All right, so we went backwards. Byron brought in a kombucha, which we talked about, the unified kombucha made from oolong tea, and I didn't mention this, but I post, everything. I'm going to post what we tasted for our wine sip. I'm going to ask you quickly to answer my wine list. 5 questions. I asked you. I asked you these same 5 questions, 4 years ago, and I'll do a comparison. So the first question is, what are you drinking now? And that is in the context of what are you curious about? What's in your fridge? What do you keep drinking, over and over? The season changes may change that.
Sure.
And just a few things. What do you?
Well, right now, anything tied into a Wild World.
Okay, so your focus is related.
A lot of cider, a lot of local cider, a lot of craft beers, lambic beers.
More of that than even wine itself?
No.
Okay.
But equal to it. Kombuchas that are interesting, and there are a lot of interesting kombuchas now.
Yes.
Words I never thought I would say.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
But keep an open mind, right?
Yeah, and hopefully more people get into it and do it the right way. So what you're drinking now is a variety of things that particularly relate to the festival, which is wild ferments of wine, beer, mead, kombucha. Good answer. A lot of times I say, well, give me some specifics. I think if you look at the lineup at Wild World, there's your answer.
Right.
It's any of those guys. All right. I think I may have gotten caught on this, and I asked you before because it's the goofiest effing question. And the question is your favorite wine and food pairing.
Well, I told you I wasn't.
I thought 5-7 years ago this was a cool question. In the last 4 years, I prefaced it by saying this is the nerdiest question, but I'm not about to take it off. So, you've tasted a lot of wines. You have been in the food business. I'm not asking you what you think the best wine and food pairing is. I'm asking what you like.
What I like, I told you I wasn't going to say something corny or cute.
Right.
But I'm going to get cute with the answer.
Okay. I'll be the judge of that.
I lied. Okay. It doesn't get any cornier than this.
Come on, let's go.
Loire Cabernet Franc with fall leaves and a scarf.
I don't know what to do. Punch you or throw you out. But punching is very violent. So let me rid myself in the room of that thought. And it would be interruptive to throw you out. Okay, we got the fun answer out. Now give me a friggin' answer, will you? Is it Pinot Noir and chicken? I mean, what is it?
No, it's Cabernet Franc with
fall leaves.
Like a Chinon, a rustic Chinon, like Marula or Lenoir.
With?
Any fall dish,
Okay.
roasted vegetables.
Right, we move
stew,
into that heartier. Okay.
But there is something about Cabernet Franc that it awed me about it.
So when you answer that question, your love of Cabernet Franc and how you think about it triggers you to start the answer with Cabernet Franc, and then what goes with it?
I mean, Cabernet Franc is the most difficult grape to enjoy. It seems to only be good when it's organic and in the Loire Valley, and even then it's like 5%.
Yeah, you're right about that.
But when it's spectacular, man,
you're right.
Chenin, the same, only Loire.
Yes,
for me.
And you know what? it's not one of the wines that a million people are making, but they're making it everywhere. And
Right.
to your point, you
Right.
got to go back to the source. All right. I hope you can answer this, because when I ask it, I don't want you to feel like you have to rank it, or if you exclude anyone, you screwed them. But the question is your favorite wine restaurant and or bar. And the question is, who are the good practitioners of food and wine, or just a wine bar? And this is a Byron question. It's not like, well, these guys are the best. It's where do you go that you're comfortable, or the vibe is good, or the list, impresses you?
Well, I like surprises, and so I've listed some places that continually surprise me, and are the import sections of wine these days. My favorite is there's in Montmartre in Paris. It's called Rock Bottles, and it's an English expat named Oliver Gage, and you go in there. It's just, you don't know anything. He does.
It's a retailer or a wine?
Retail.
Okay.
It's wines you've never heard of, and he goes deep. He does his work. He studies. He goes to every salon like no one else.
Wow.
Highly recommend that.
I don't think anybody's ever mentioned that guy. Give me something else like that.
For an interesting list in Barcelona, the Monochrome. In Texas, there's Light Years.
Monochrome's the name of the restaurant?
Restaurant, yeah. In Texas, there's...
You don't hear people talk about Monochrome when you hear Barcelona.
Great little list in a great little square.
See,
solid
this is
food.
what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
All right, Texas.
Go to Light Years in Houston and Lolo in Austin. Great list, passionate proprietors. Always a surprise, always fun. There's a new bar, and I just went to New Orleans fairly recently. It's called the Tell Me Bar.
Oh, that's...
Have you heard of it?
That's, what's his name?
Corey.
Yeah.
That's a great
they're
little
getting
bar.
a lot of recognition. I guess COVID delayed the opening and all that, and they got going. It's like the coolest bar in the country, and certainly in New Orleans. Yeah.
One more I want to shout out to for this summer. I went to spend some time in France. There's a bar in a town called Sète, which is it's a coastal town, a industrial kind of sea town known for its oysters. And there's a natural wine bar there called Cave Vivant in Sète.
Sète is S-E-T?
S-E-T-E.
T-E, okay.
And
what's the closest?
Montpellier.
Okay.
But everyone is around there. Matassa, La Sorga, Peyras, so many producers are within that region. But what I love about it, and what I love about the natural wine bar scene, is you go to a place like this, you find it on Raisin or word of mouth, and you go to this spot, and it's a culture there and a community of, I guess, natural wine lovers, if that's a thing. And, the whole trip was set after that. They told you where to go. Well, don't go there for oysters. I know a spot.
Wow.
Someone nudges them. So you shouldn't be telling them about this spot.
Right.
Yeah, amazing. And that's kind of what I look for. Choose the wines for me. Tell me where to go.
That's me too.
Yeah.
It's in your hands.
It's in your hands. Exactly.
I know shit.
Exactly.
You tell me,
I mess it up every time.
Especially when I'm totally out of an element.
Totally.
All right, those are good ones. And like I said, I'm going to post those. And that's why I do this thing, because it disseminates great information that only, guys like you will, come across and touch. All right, fourth question. And let me set this up for you before you jump into it. Favorite all-time wine. In the old days when I started the show, I would like to ask Aldo some, what's your favorite all-time wine? And I was leaning towards, Aldo, you're exposed to everything. What was the most expensive, rare wine? I don't care about that. The question now is favorite all-time wine in the context of what is that wine to Byron Bates that was an awakening wine, a gateway wine, an influencer wine that changed the way you thought. And it may not be one, it could be a few. Maybe you can't answer it. Maybe it's like,
well, it's the wine.
Maybe it's like leaves in a scarf.
The wine. Yeah, that's my answer again.
Okay, we're doing that
Ditto. One of the most seminal wines, which I think back on a lot. It's defunct now, but it's Domaine de Peyrat. 2004.
Can you spell for me so I know what
Domaine de Peyra.
Peyra? Okay.
It was in the Auvergne. It was all Gamay. Stéphane Majoun and Emmanuel Chavasieux. And it was when natural wine had started. So 2004, 2005, this came along. It was like $80, $90 a carton, a case, wholesale. We were pouring it by the glass. Everyone sort of had it, and it became a phenomenon. And then it just is gone.
What region did you say it was from?
Auvergne. It's
Auvergne.
Volcanic, Ghanaian volcanic soil. Those were great.
When
Those were
did they
great and
stop
fun.
making wine?
2007, I think.
Is there any of it around?
I had it in Copenhagen 5 years ago, and the waitress, she was like, "Oh, you want the Peyra? Okay, let's do it. So it's 5 minutes open. Poof, it's gone." So we're like, we got it. Like, it's light. It's volcanic soil. It's Gamay. It's like, well, there's 5 of us. We'll get through it in 5 minutes.
Pour it. We'll drink it.
There was a little bit of magic left in it, and you
Did
still
you capture it?
You
got it in the glass.
Yeah, it's still there.
Was it ridiculously priced or not necessarily?
No, not really. Saturn used to have some late in there in Paris. I think they're closed now, but they had some. You see it a few places now. And the other was Brendishev, Minot Pinot by Claude Tubab, Thierry Pouzelat, and his brother. That was it was a grape I'd never heard of.
When did you drink that?
2004 or 5.
Okay. So these were the early shaping.
Oh, man. It was like
to these days.
Montrachet. It was beautiful.
But these wines, I'm asking you, stood out. I mean, that's why you're recalling them. I mean, I'm sure you had other ones, but these are notables.
That was the turn. It was
right.
Those were seminal for sure.
Those are good ones. And like I said, post those. All right. Last question. And, a lot of times I put people on the spot and say, if you can't answer this one properly, then who can? And the question is, recommend to me the best wines around 15, 20, 22 bucks. Easy. I need a red and a white. The redundant setup is my kids are in their late 20s, early 30s. They can't bring a shitty $11 supermarket wine to a dinner as a gift. But they also are not spending $45. So how do you wow and ooh at $19, $23? What are you bringing? You could do region, Muscadet, whatever, or you could do makers, both, whatever. So recommend a red and a white to me.
Okay.
Keep the price range in mind.
The price range is in mind. White. Okay. Roditas from Peloponnese.
Wait, Roditas is the maker?
It's the grape.
The grape. Roditis.
Roditas.
And it's from where?
It's what Retsina is made with.
Okay.
It's from a producer called Tetramythos.
Spell Te. Tetramythos. Is this Greek?
It's Greek, yes.
Okay, Tetramythos. All right, I'll figure everything out.
Full disclosure, it's a Goat Boy wine.
Okay, so, I'm fine with that.
But it's great value. It hits that mark of $15. Also, the Retsina he does, fantastic Retsina.
Are these good food wines?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Oh yes.
All right, so
it's Roditas Nature, so it's also sans soufre.
Okay.
Beautiful, inexpensive. All you need.
You get everything you want at the price. I'm pretty comfortable saying I don't think anyone's ever recommended that wine on the show.
No,
we've
no
done
one has.
Almost 300 wine lists. Nobody put that. All right, so that's my white. What's my red?
Red, a little more difficult.
Red is more difficult.
In
the price.
Under around 15 retail?
You can go 20, 22, 23 bucks. Retail.
Okay. I will go with I don't know if it's 22. It's close. I
don't care.
I'm sorry, folks. I'm under pressure.
No, you don't have to apologize. I'm letting you out. I'm happy to talk about Goat Boy wine.
Thank you.
Because of the reason why that you procure these, winemakers, and they're just in a list of good winemakers. So who's the red?
Let's go with Louis Mauer, Mauer.
Okay.
Young winemaker in Alsace, and his Pinot Noir, which is on the inexpensive side. I think it would be about 22 wholesale. It's got that rusticity of you recognize from like a Frick or Binet Alsatian Pinot, a little softer, but great food wine, great
That's
wine
a
on
good
its
one.
own. Yeah, it's delicious.
Is
It's
it
really good?
characteristic of Alsatian Pinots?
It is. It is, but a little softer.
Okay. Like I said, I'm going to post all of those. I mean, we didn't go quick, but there's a lot of new names and all that. So, I do a social media post with the wine list, so everybody will, what was Byron talking about? What's that white wine? You'll all have access to the postings. I thank you for that. You did an admirable job on that with some exciting new wines. All right, Byron, we got to wrap up. Byron said to me, he goes, "We're doing the interview. What's it going to be about? 35 minutes?" I just want you to know
It flew by, right?
We're at the 1.5 hour mark almost. All right, Byron, let me do a quick wrap up, and I need some info from you to help our listeners. So if you have a question, suggestion, wine happening, or event, hit me up at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's sam@thegrapenation.com. As always, subscribe to the Grape Nation podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your pods. If you like the show, leave a good review. And also, like I said, subscribe. You can follow us on Instagram at SBenRuby and on Twitter at BenRuby, which are two different things, but you can always get us at the hashtag #TheGrapeNation. We're at Facebook at The Grape Nation. As I mentioned, we will post Byron's wine list, those 5 questions, all the great specific answers. I'll post those. The weekly wine sip, which was out of order today. The kombucha, I'll give you more info on that. And Byron, let's just check people again. Where can we find more information on the festival? We mentioned it, but let's tell everyone the place to go to see if there's tickets for the panels, that dinner, the grand tasting, or the walk-around tasting. Where do we go?
wildworldfestival.com. Tickets.
Festival with no S.
Festival with no S.
Right.
It's $45 a ticket. We're the cheapest festival. We have no corporate sponsorship. We have the lowest table fee for producers. We're going to have food by Emile from Le Chateaubriand. So please come out and support us.
That's a pretty good offering for the price.
It has to be cheap these days. There's too many festivals.
I guess. And that is October 30th at Strong Rope Brewery in Red Hook, Brooklyn.
Overlooks the bay and the Statue of Liberty. It's a gorgeous setting.
What was the time again?
12 to 6:30.
12 to 6. So don't get there too early because you won't get in. And don't bum yourself out and get there too late. It does sound great. Isn't the dinner up in Hudson?
There's a pop-up dinner with the chef from Chateaubriand after Peripheral, which I encourage people to come to also on Saturday. It's at Rivertown Lodge. It's $95 a person, which is a bargain.
Which is a bargain for that dinner.
And you can get tickets. Also go to the website or go to Resi for tickets for that night at Rivertown Lodge.
Okay. All right.
And the dinner. There's a few tickets left for October 29th at the Red Hook Brewery with Dr. Patrick McGovern, Alice Spiring, and Garrett Oliver.
You mentioned that.
And
right? That's with wine and food. No, I'm happy to mention it
go
again.
to that.
So there's
on the website
Hudson
also.
Valley and here at Strong Rope.
Yes.
Here is Alice, Garrett, and Dr.
Pat McGovern.
Okay. And there's wine and food.
There's wine and food, and we're going to get really geeky.
And like you said, reservations, tickets still available for everything?
There's a few general public tickets for that.
Okay. So get off your behind if you want to do this, because if you wait, they won't be there. All right, Byron, I want to thank our guest, Byron Bates. for coming in and talking about everything natural wine, his festivals. As always, thank you to our engineer, Armin, and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. I'm Sam Ben Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation. The Grape Nation is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.